Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, March 28th, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, the great Ari Berman from Mother Jones Magazine on how Trump is rigging the census. Also on the program today, China claims North Korea prepared to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. That, folks, is what we call the laying of the trap. Supreme Court to hear another gerrymander case, this one out of Maryland. And Scott Walker's attempt to delay the special election in Wisconsin smacked down again in a federal court. 12 states sue Donald Trump administration over that census. And Steven Crowder cancels a show over the number of yellow M&Ms in his green room and blames the libs. Your app is about to break the law, ladies and gentlemen. And a court filing, Trump's deputy campaign manager, Rick Gates, knowingly was in contact with Russian spy. Protests in Sacramento over the killing of Stephon Clark, while the killers, police officers both, of Alton Sterling in Louisiana, don't even get charges. Lastly, a new study says 1 million people are out of the workforce as of 2015 because of opioids. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. A couple of house cleaning notes. One, I want to say thank you to a bunch of people in the wake of our hitting over 250,000 subscribers on YouTube. Obviously want to thank old Matt, but the person who really juiced us, who set us on a trajectory, who changed the angle of our trajectory, if you will. Like, we were sort of going like this, and we're going like this. Of course, was old Kelly, or not old Kelly. Just
I don't
regular,
think she would like that moniker.
Regular Kelly. Regular, classic Kelly. Let's put it that way.
I thought you were going to say George Soros.
Well, and then, of course, it's George Soros. And the other little dirty secret about our YouTube is not just our viewers, but also, I probably shouldn't say this, but we're involved in a collusionary relationship with Google, obviously pumped by George Soros.
I just wanted to say,
let me just
thank
finish.
Our community. And
You can do that in a moment, but I'm trying to get to the heart of the matter. We were involved in, of course, silencing right-wing voices on YouTube. We did this through some back channels that we have here Nothing, untoward and completely, we should say, completely opaque.
Totally unprompted.
And we were able to silence many of our critics. People, in fact, we had a whole list. We didn't even know half the people on there. It was basically more or less like, do you want these guys gone? And we would just be like, yes, because we could.
Check a box.
We called it Operation Shh.
Right, exactly. And here's the thing that I found, that when you have this power, you just feel like, why not use it? And so we shut down a lot of right-wing things. We, of course, demonetized all of Dave Rubin's interviews for just a period of time when it was fun. And it just got a little boring because he kept tweeting about it so much that it got annoying. And then simultaneously, every time we silenced a right-winger, we were given extra subscriptions from those people. So we actually sucked, it would be almost like a vampire. Right? Like we would suck the blood out of them, and then it would sort of make us stronger.
It's actually cool.
No, yeah, no,
came
the whole
from Mexico.
process.
The
We
bots.
we have a one of those what do you call it? One of those decks. What do they call that when you make those in for businesses when you show PowerPoint? We have a PowerPoint about the whole thing, and of course it's incredibly secret.
You know what I
And
love is every time you're looking for something like that, I pause because I think you're reaching for something like obscure and complex. I'm like, you mean a SWOT analysis? Like, where are you going? And then you're just like, PowerPoint.
PowerPoint. I mean, in the context of my life, PowerPoint's pretty obscure. The only time that we do that is when we're outlining, sort of the
When we're colluding with Google.
Yeah.
Sorry. I don't know why we're saying all this publicly.
Yeah, no, this is probably not appropriate for us to do. Anyways, I wanted to say that and to thank all of our viewers who, we're thanking our viewers just as cover. So to make it seem like that's why we got those views.
I want to say
And
thank
those
our
subscribers.
community,
Right.
by which I mean YouTube moderators and Mexican bots.
Thanks, Eric.
I also want to just do a shout out to the universe. Thank you so much for allowing me to turn on Twitter and see that Sam Harris is having a fight both with Glenn Greenwald and Ezra Klein at the same time, because that was it really actually the amazing thing is that for all his work as a new atheist, when I saw that, I thought, oh my God, there is a God. And because only God would have given me the gift of watching Sam Harris get into a fight. Now look, in some respects, I'm maybe, in some issues I think I'm more aligned with Glenn Greenwald, and there's aspects of his career that I really appreciate more than Ezra Klein's. But in some respects, I think, probably on some questions, I agree with Ezra Klein. But these two guys, in terms of demeanor, really run the gamut in terms of I don't think I've ever seen Ezra Klein get into a Twitter fight. And even in his exchange with Sam Harris, it was
saintly.
It was sort of like watching a Canadian interact with an American. And yet, Sam Harris had a total meltdown.
You know what it was? It was like watching somebody who actually is, for better and for worse, what Sam Harris postures to be, interacting with somebody who's a mental case.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. That's exactly right. Sam Harris met the projection of who Sam Harris pretends to be. And when he met him in that alley, he turned into a lunatic. So I just wanted to thank Sam Harris and God for that, because I really enjoyed it. So, all right, we're going to play a video. We got to take a quick break. We'll pick up Ari Berman. He's got a big piece out today, timed with the one of the announcements of the Trump administration on the census, really designed to create an undercount of the census. And the implications of that are pretty huge. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. I ran into Galaxy 500 again the other day by chance, and now I haven't been able to get it out of my head. Ladies and gentlemen, it is always a pleasure to welcome back to the program a senior reporter from Mother Jones Magazine, Ari Berman, here to discuss his recently released piece, in fact today, Hidden Figures, How Donald Trump is Rigging the Census. Hello, Ari. Welcome back to the program.
Hey, Sam. Thank you for having me back.
It is always a pleasure, Ari. And, you know, your beat really for the past, I don't know, half dozen years has been on voting rights. And you, of course, wrote a, I believe, if it wasn't best-selling, it should have been best-selling, a book on...
If it wasn't, it will be now.
It will be now on, what is it? Give me the vote? I forgot.
Give us the ballot.
Give us the ballot.
It was so great you couldn't remember the title.
No, you know how many books I come across my desk, but I reference that book very often. So, but you're writing about the census.
Yeah.
Were you anticipating this question or the announcement of this question by the Trump administration? Tell us what the question is.
Yeah, I was anticipating this. So the Trump administration decided on Monday night they would add a question about U.S. citizenship to the census form, which is just one question, but it's an absolutely enormous deal because this question about citizenship has not been asked by the census since 1950. So it hasn't been asked for basically 70 years. And it's never been asked when we've had such an anti-immigrant president like Donald Trump. So no immigrant, I think, citizen or non-citizen, is going to voluntarily want to give their immigration status to the Trump administration for fear that that's going to be used to try to deport them. And so this is a major issue. And I began looking into the census well before this because the census for quite a while has been under a huge threat by Trump. I began hearing rumbles about this last year. The budget's been cut. They're moving to the internet instead of using paper forms. The director resigned last May, the same day James Comey was fired. So there was all of these issues. They tried to put an expert on Republican gerrymandering to run the census. That backfired.
That was Thomas Brunel. We'll talk about that because that guy is hilarious.
So anyway, I know this is all stuff we could talk about individually. But the point is the census was facing essentially unprecedented issues going into the 2020 census. And then now you have this question about citizenship that I think is going to blow up the entire census. I think we are facing, for the first time in modern U.S. history, the prospect of a failed census. And I tried to lay out in my piece what that means, why it's so important. Because I think a lot of people know that there is a census, but I don't think people know what it does. They don't realize, for example, that $765 billion in federal funding is allocated based on the census for literally every program, that the census forms the basis for how districts are drawn, that the census determines how many electoral votes each state receives, and that certain people, particularly people of color and immigrants, are always missed by the census for one reason or another. And that risk of an undercount is huge now. And if there's a big undercount of people of color, of immigrants, that means that those states where they live, places like California and New York, for example, they're at risk of losing billions of dollars of funding and a lot of political power as a result.
Okay. All right. So let's back up just for a moment. The census, is this something that the United States undertook because, hey, it's a good idea to count people? I mean, how fundamental? Because I don't think people realize this. And you used to hear, conservatives talk about, we're going to get rid of the Commerce Department. Well, the most important thing the Commerce Department actually does is the census. And this is, and I don't think most people understand this, it is constitutionally mandated. And it's not a mandate to count citizens, is it?
No, it's not. It's been done every year since 1790. It's one of the oldest and most important constitutional mandates in this country. We need to know who lives here for so many different purposes. It forms the basis for how districts are drawn. It forms the basis for how funding is allocated. It forms the districts for every single institution in America. Talk to any businessman. Talk to any leader. Talk to any president of a university. Talk to any military general. They'll tell you how important census data is for understanding their populations. And And so this is something that we've done every 10 years, and the census calls for an actual enumeration of the population, meaning everyone who lives here, whether they're a citizen or non-citizen, counts. And I've noticed a lot of discussion in the last day where conservatives have been like, why? That's ridiculous. Why would we count citizens? They're here illegally, and they don't understand. We've been doing it since 1790. This is what the Constitution says. We have to know who lives here so we can make all sorts of decisions, from who gets to be represented to who gets funding as a result. And so if we suddenly decide that, number one, we just don't count immigrants at all, we're not going to know who lives here. But number two, if we decide to then just count citizens for purposes of redistricting, which I think is a long-term plan that Republicans have here, that is going to be a massive, massive restructuring of what our democracy is supposed to do.
And I mean, I wonder about the constitutionality of asking a question or engaging in a practice in the course of trying to execute the census that one can reasonably know will inhibit the count. I mean, has the court addressed the constitutionality of something like that? I mean, we know, okay, now people can disagree. People can say, like, I don't like undocumented immigrants, so I don't care if they don't answer the census or whatnot. That's all well and good. But from a constitutional standpoint, there's a mandate to count every single person in the country. If the government engages in a practice that it knows will undercount, is that constitutional?
Well, we're going to find out, because 12 states have already said they're going to challenge this, and California has already filed suit against it. So this is going to be a huge political battle for the next few years. I don't think it is constitutional, and I don't think it's constitutional for a few different reasons. Number one is I think this would sabotage the core mission of the census, which is to count everyone. Number two, this did not go through the proper protocol. So any new question for the census goes through rigorous testing. If you want to change the census form at all, that's subject to years of analysis and focus groups and government research and all of those things. What the Trump administration did is the Department of Justice asked for this question in December, and they had a deadline of March to then figure out if they wanted to add it, which is a ridiculously compressed timeline, way shorter than any other question that would be analyzed. Then they had this completely bogus rationale, which that they needed this information to enforce the Voting Rights Act, which is just the most laughable, total farce that I've ever heard. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard the Trump administration say, because I'm serious, like, of all the stupid, ridiculous, just completely wrong things the Trump administration says, the idea that they're suddenly interested in enforcing the Voting Rights Act is the most laughable. This is an administration that hasn't filed a single lawsuit to enforce the Voting Rights Act, that founded a commission that spread lies about voter fraud, that's staffed by people like Jeff Sessions, who have fought voting rights their entire life. So this is needed to enforce the Voting Rights Act is a complete farce.
But what is presumably, right, there's a subtitle to that explanation. We need this to enforce the Voting Rights Act because what data?
This is what they're claiming. So the census already asks about citizenship on what's called the Longer American Community Survey. So there's a much longer census survey, not the every 10-year census, but it's called the American Community Survey that happens on a rolling basis every year.
And you're not obligated to answer that in the way that you are obligated to answer the census. Let's be clear.
Exactly.
One is a opt-in survey. One
survey.
is the actual census.
Yeah, and it goes to 15% of the population. And they ask about citizenship there. And they ask about citizenship there, and then that information is used to enforce the Voting Rights Act in terms of who are citizen and non-citizen voters. Nobody's ever had a problem with that. I haven't heard one civil rights lawyer ever say, hey, you know what, the American Constitution survey isn't useful for voting rights implementation. We need this question asked on the full census. In fact, this came up 2 years ago when the Supreme Court heard a challenge that basically conservatives wanted districts to be drawn based on citizenship, not based on total population as it is now. And directors of the Census Bureau wrote in and they said any attempt to ask about citizenship on the census form will not only depress results, but it'll be inaccurate because people are just going to lie and say they're citizens. So there's no point in asking this on the full census form. So the subtext of why it was needed was so easily debunked. And I mean, you can read the whole 7-page memo that the Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross wrote. But this had nothing to do with the Voting Rights Act. This was about trying to, number one, depress responses among immigrants so that areas with immigrants get less power and economic resources. And number two, I think long term, trying to be able to draw districts only based on citizens so that places like California and even Texas will get fewer resources and they will count less. And this is a way, as the country becomes more diverse, districts will instead become much more white if this scheme succeeds.
Okay, so in 2010, the 2010 census, it was determined that there was a huge undercount of people of color. Just how do we know that? I mean, what happened that we found that out a little bit later, and what are the implications of it?
We know that because the census goes and they do a survey after the fact to see how accurate they were. And the 2010 census actually was pretty accurate. But despite the fact that it was accurate, they found that white people were overcounted by nearly 1%, and they failed to count 1.5 million people of color, which included about, I forget the exact percentages, but a significant percentage of African Americans, of Latinos, and of Native Americans. And what that meant is that those areas received less federal funding, they received less representation. Places like California, for example, lost out on billions of dollars in federal funding because their populations weren't counted. So you have states essentially that are more diverse, that have more immigrants, that have more young people, that have more people of color. If they're not counted correctly, they're going to get fewer resources and representation than places that are more homogenous, that are older, that are whiter, for example. So that's why it matters, that the count forms the basis for how so much stuff is done in the country, that if the count is wrong, certain places are going to be penalized more than others.
Okay, so let's talk about the sort of the various, and I think in your piece you quoted and I can't remember who it was, is basically saying, like, this is the perfect storm in terms of all of the challenges that the census is facing. And they all seem to be either challenges that have been created by neglect or just outright malfeasance. You've got budget cuts enacted by the Trump administration, and the Bureau had to cancel field tests in 2017 and 2018. What does that mean?
What it means is that anytime the census does anything, they have to test it. So they have to test, for example, the questions they're going to ask. They have to test how they're going to do the full test. The full run in 2020 has to be tweaked, and it needs to be tweaked every 10 years because different people live in areas. There's different technology they use. Things have changed between the decades, and so
we need to know how long it takes to send someone around a neighborhood.
We need to know if we're going to find every house, for example, which is the big problem. The biggest reason why people aren't counted is because the Census Bureau doesn't know where they live, not because they don't respond to the form. And so the tests were specifically designed to try to reach what's known as hard-to-count populations. So they were going to go to Native American reservations, for example, in North and South Dakota and Washington State, because Native Americans are among the most undercounted people. My story takes place in Fresno, California, because that's another place that has a lot of immigrants, a lot of people of color, and the census tends to not do as well in counting those neighborhoods as they do in counting whiter and more prosperous areas. So these tests are super important, and the census had to cancel all of their tests. So they're only doing one test before the 2020 census, one test in Providence, Rhode Island. I just talked to the Rhode Island Secretary of State, who's a Latino elected official, Nelly Gorbea. She told me she hasn't heard anything from the Census Bureau about this test. So even one of the highest-ranking officials in Rhode Island doesn't even seem to know about this test. And the question about citizenship won't even be on the test. So they're not even going to know. So Wilbur Ross keeps saying, well, we won't know the impact of this question. Well, the very reason why they won't know the impact of this is
because they're not testing it.
Because it was added so late that you couldn't test it. It's such a diabolical scheme. And so essentially what we're going to do is we're going to send millions of households a new question that hasn't been tested before, that's going to take place amid unprecedented levels of fear among immigrants. And not only that, but the census is going to move from being on paper to being online. So everyone's going to be told essentially go fill out the census online as well. Well, in the era of Russian hacking, in the era of so many people skeptical, Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, I don't think people are going to want to fill out the form online, and particularly I don't think they're going to trust the Trump administration to keep their data secure. So all of these things are the subtext to the problems the census is facing.
I want to just circle back to the online thing, but I also feel like I can't help myself but to express what one of those dudes in Rhode Island's going to say when they finally get this, and it's going to be something to the effect of like, "Dude, this ain't going to work." All right, so let me ask you this: 200,000 fewer enumerators. What does that mean?
So basically what the census does is if you don't initially respond to your census form, they send someone out to knock on your door.
What is the normal rate? Like,
known.
how does that normally work? Okay, so they send out the letter. I remember getting this.
Yeah.
And you fill it out. What's the usual rate of return?
The usual rate of return is about 75%, but it's been going down every year. So apparently it was 63% in 2010, and now they think it's going to go down to 55% of people initially filling out the form. This was before the citizenship question was added. So who knows at this point?
And wait a second. And so you're also relying on people to have internet access to respond to this. And my sense is that once you get to a certain income level, most of that internet access is via the phone. And that's a much harder thing to fill out, I would imagine, on your phone than it would be on, let's say, a computer.
Yeah, so what they're going to do is they're going to mail people a postcard, and they're going to tell them to fill it out online. And basically, if you don't fill it out online, someone will come knock on their door, but there will be fewer people that knock on their door. But then you also raise the important issue that it's one thing to, like, send an email on your phone. It's another thing to do, like, a 10-minute confidential survey on your phone. And I think that people are not going to want to fill out something like the census on their mobile phones, if they even have this, because what I notice is, first off, there's a digital divide. That it's very clear about a third of African Americans and Latinos don't have desktop computers or internet at home. Now, even if they have internet on their phones, there's a big divide between how much money you have and your connectivity. So even if you look, for example, at the data, there's a big disparity between people who, for example, make over $100,000 and people who make under $30,000 in terms of whether they even have a cell phone that's connected to the internet. So I think there's going to be a lot of issues with it. Even in a perfect world, if all the political environment were fine, there were going to be people that were going to be unwilling to fill this out online. Now you add this question about citizenship with Trump running the census, and I just think that every problem that already existed is going to be compounded.
Okay, and so what is the drop off in terms of enumerators? I mean, 200,000 fewer enumerators. How many? Because I think if people weren't sort of like, if you're not conscious, and I just so happened, I'm on radio, I'm talking about jobs and this and that. The number of people involved in the census is massive. Well, give us a sense of how many enumerators there are. So when we see 200,000, how much of a percentage drop off does that represent?
It's a major drop-off. There were going to be, I mean, I don't know the percentages offhand, but if you just look at the numbers, there were like I'll just look it up. I'll look it up right now, actually. There were 500,000 enumerators in 2010, and there's an estimated 300,000 in 2020.
So that's almost a 50%, 40% a cut. That's stunning.
It's a major decline because they were projecting, first off, that more people were going to respond to the form online, which I don't think is true. And then they were going to try to verify people through administrative records and other things like that. But if you're already a hard count individual who, for example, lives in a neighborhood that the government doesn't have their addresses accurately, then they're not going to be on administrative records and other things like that. The census did just get a funding increase finally by the Congress after years and years of budget cuts. The Congress just gave the census $1 billion funding increase. I think that funding increase has been almost totally negated by the new citizenship question. Whatever they were going to try to spend to make the census more efficient, they're going to have to try to spend convincing people to even fill out the census in the first place. And my feeling is Trump doesn't want people to fill out the census. So I just think that no amount of money is going to remedy the political problem that we have here of the administration deliberately trying to sabotage the census for political purposes and people not trusting the Trump administration with their data. I don't know how you get beyond that. What I'm hearing anecdotally from people after the citizenship question is tons and tons of people are saying they're not going to respond to the census form or they're going to skip this question. And then not only that, but what's happened in years past. For example, Latino groups have had what they've called trusted messengers to try to get the message out about why it's important to respond to the census. So like there was a storyline on Univision on a telenovela about like why it was important to respond to the census. They made one of the characters a census worker. Are they going to do that now under Trump? Is Telemundo going to volunteer to promote the census under Trump? I mean, as someone told me, the trusted messengers themselves don't trust the message anymore, and that's the problem.
I mean, people also, there's and I want to remind people that we have hundreds of thousands of people who registered under the DACA program and essentially found that what they were doing was just giving ICE directions to their home, essentially. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So the level of trust amongst various communities, never mind just immigrant communities. I don't think it would be that hard, frankly, to find, white suburban people who are like, I don't know if I feel comfortable with the Trump administration in some respects. But certainly within the context of immigrant communities, you would be facing an uphill battle anyways, I think.
You are already facing an uphill battle. What I learned when I was in California, in the Central Valley, in the Fresno area, talking to Latino immigrants was, first off, a lot of them had just never received a census form to begin with. So even if they wanted to fill out the census form, they never got one. And then they heard a lot of stories about people who didn't want to fill out the form if they had received one. And then I asked them, would you respond to the form if it included a question about citizenship? And I didn't ask people whether they were documented or not, but virtually everyone told me they wouldn't fill out the form if it included that question about citizenship. And that was before this question was added, but it was almost unanimous in terms of people not trusting the Trump administration with their data. And so why would anyone voluntarily give this to the Trump administration? I think that's the big problem here. And I think the Trump administration obviously knew that this was going to be an issue. Trump's reelection campaign, before this decision was even made, sent out an email basically saying that this was common sense and blasting attorney generals for threatening to file suit against the citizenship question. So this is all about politics, I think. This is all about the Trump administration wanting to demonize immigrants, wanting to turn the census into a weapon of nativist resentment. And I think it's all about longer term Republicans wanting to exclude non-citizen, whether legal or undocumented, from counting towards political representation because they feel like that's one of the only ways they can maintain a majority in the face of really rapid demographic change.
I want to remind people, and you bring it up in your piece, that the first appointment that the Trump administration attempted to make to the census, to the Bureau as deputy director of the Census Bureau, was a guy named Thomas Brunel, who, and I'm not joking about this, wrote a book in 2008 called Redistricting and Representation, Why Competitive Elections Are Bad for America. That's not a joke. He ultimately had to drop out because he had absolutely no statistical background. Like usually you hire like someone who's a professor of statistics or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Usually you hire a career Census Bureau official to essentially run the 2020s, to run the census, to be deputy director of the Census Bureau. Right now we have a situation where, so he withdrew. There was a lot of pressure on him. Apparently Wilbur Ross wasn't that crazy about him. I have no faith anymore in Wilbur Ross, so I don't know what happened between the time that he tried to oust Thomas Brunel and add the citizenship question. It seems completely insane to me that you would decide that you didn't want someone with a Republican redistricting background to run the census, but then you wanted a question on citizenship on there, which is going to achieve the exact same ends as Thomas Brunel would have pushed for. So I think it's very contradictory in terms of what the Census Bureau is doing. But right now, they don't have a full-time leader. The head of the Census Bureau resigned in June. He actually said he was leaving the same day that James Comey was fired. So that was kind of overshadowed by the Comey news. But this was a big deal. And right now they have acting people in here, and the acting people have no stature. And one of the things we've heard is that they were overruled by Wilbur Ross. And I don't think it was even Wilbur Ross. I think it was the higher-ups in the Justice Department and the White House that made this decision. And so right now the lack of real leadership in the census means that it's so easy for the administration to politicize this process. And this, not to get too into the weeds here, but if you look at who else at the Census Bureau, one of the senior advisors to the Census Bureau is a former pollster for Kellyanne Conway. So, I mean, they've just basically taken like people from the RNC that know nothing about the census and have installed them at the Census Bureau. And so I just think there's unprecedented political interference taking place with the Census Bureau right now, even though this one guy, Thomas Brunel, had to withdraw.
Okay, so what? There's multiple lawsuits that are being filed. I think you said 12 states at this point have at least indicated that they're going to file suit. I think Eric Holder's outfit is going to plan to file suit. I'd be surprised if we didn't see other organizations file suit over this. Aside from the courts, because who knows with these guys. I mean, could there be an attempt by people to say, like, I'm just, I'm not going to answer that citizen question. I'm a citizen, but I'm not going to answer that question, to essentially, like, keep it from drawing attention if you don't answer that question? Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do follow what you're saying. I mean, so there's already people that don't answer that question on the American Community Survey, for example, the smaller survey that's asked. I don't know how this would play out, because I think one of the things they want to do is they want to draw districts only based on citizens. So that if you don't answer you're a citizen, then does that mean you're not going to be counted when they go to draw the districts, even if you are a citizen? So there's just so many unanswered questions.
Does that question have to be resolved at the Supreme Court? Whether or not we're going to base districts based on citizens or voting citizens, for that matter, as opposed to children. I mean, or
it was already resolved by the Supreme Court. I mean, there was a unanimous decision 2 years ago where the Supreme Court said you draw districts based on total population, not on citizenship. Now, it wasn't a hard and fast rule. They didn't say that you could never do that, but they said that the scheme that they came up with in Texas wouldn't work. And so I think that the reason why they wanted to ask the citizenship question on the census was to try to do an end around that decision. And the same people that pushed for districts to be drawn just based on citizens were the same people that brought the legislation that gutted the Voting Rights Act. So, I mean, this is all just so transparent. I mean, the idea that they want this to enforce the Voting Rights Act is just so laughable. This is a long-term scheme by the Republican Party to try to insulate their majorities in the face of rapid demographic change and shifting political power. And the efforts to rig the census have to be seen along the same lines as the rampant gerrymandering we're seeing, the voter suppression we're seeing, the attempt to buy elections by conservative billionaires. It's all part of the same system of undermining democracy. The difference is that the census affects everything in democracy. It affects literally every part of our democracy. And so if you rig the census, there's no way to correct it, because it's like the underlying basis for everything else that happens. It only happens once every 10 years, and if you do it right, do it wrong, there aren't any do-overs. There's no corrective you can't redraw the census like you redraw a district if it's found unconstitutional. So that's why this is so serious. And if it gets screwed up, all that information is going to last till 2030. So I just think that This is a wonky issue. I know that it's hard to understand, but it's so important that we try to correct what's going wrong with the census. Otherwise, it's going to affect everything for the next decade.
This is, in many respects, the DNA of the next 10 years of sort of the political organization of our country. Let me ask you this. I mean, if we're to see this in the context of all the other means that the Republicans have used, particularly over the past 10, 15 years, rollbacks of the Voting Rights Act, increased, I should say, obstacles to voting, the rampant redistricting, the gerrymandering so severe that we're seeing state Supreme Courts as well as perhaps the federal Supreme Court roll these back. Is this, what we're seeing with the census, is this a function of Trump? Or is this simply Republicans, part of their long-term project to diminish the number of people who vote?
It's both. I think it's part of a longer effort by Republicans to diminish the number of people who vote, but it's also Trump trying to particularly use the demonization of immigrants to achieve these ends. So I think if we had a different Republican, there would still be issues with the census, but it wouldn't be the same exact issues that we're seeing under Trump, where they are trying to weaponize nativist resentment and voter suppression for a very specific end. And so that's what worries me here, is that this is just beyond the usual voter suppression by Republicans. This is a whole nother level in terms of what they're trying to do here. And I think that's what distinguishes it from the other kinds of voter suppression we're seeing by Republicans. I think this is even worse because I think they're trying to achieve ends that I think even many Republicans would otherwise be uncomfortable with.
Ari Berman, senior reporter for Mother Jones Magazine, on how Donald Trump is rigging the census. Always a pleasure, Ari. Thanks so much for coming by.
Thanks so much, Sam. I really appreciate it.
All right, we're going to link Ari's piece at majority.fm. You should check it out. Ari does some pretty amazing reporting and is, I think, as I stated earlier, incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to issues of voting. Give us the ballot, right? Is that what it was? Yeah. Read that book. I read it. I guess it's like now a year or two old. He wrote it on the 50th, to be published on the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. And I think like over the course of writing it, he just watched the full-on frontal assault on the Voting Rights Act. The year escapes me now. I don't know if it was 2014 or 2012 or what, when the conservative Supreme Court basically pulled the guts out of the Voting Rights Act by saying that the pre-clearance formula that had been in place for decades and had been reauthorized by the Senate in 2007, the Republican-controlled Senate in 2007, was invalid because we had come so far in terms of racism. And literally months after the Supreme Court rolls back these pre-clearances, you see places like North Carolina, Texas, Illinois, Ohio, I think it is, other states and counties. New York has 2 counties that I think were covered under the pre-clearance provision, then instituting voter ID laws and other laws to essentially suppress the vote. So much so that the Supreme Court, in some instances, reversed it, and others didn't. But that's why you have a pre-clearance apparatus, because that way you stop them from doing it, and you don't have to go to court to get them to reverse it. It's not an easy process. It's not a quick process. But it used to be that if you were one of these counties and or states that had a history of passing laws to prevent people who were not white from voting, then you had to go to the DOJ and say, is it okay if we institute this law or that law? And the DOJ would say no or yes. And it basically just changed the burden of proof, which sounds not like much, but in practice is huge. anyways, that's where we are today. And I don't know. I got a piece right here from CNN about how the Supreme Court prepares for a right turn. This is from CNN. Since last October, the justices have issued only 17 signed decisions. That's the lowest number through the end of March for any session since John Roberts took office in 2005. That suggests a significant amount of discord on the court. Remember, Anthony Kennedy is 81. I think both Ginsburg and Ginsburg's in her 80s. We have two liberals in their 80s. And it turns out Neil Gorsuch is already, I guess, showing himself to be to the right of Antonin Scalia. Somewhere around Clarence Thomas, who is literally from another era. You know, back when people really appreciated a good Coke can pubic hair joke. Back from those days. What's that?
I still appreciate the joke.
No, you love that joke.
Yeah,
he does that. Michael does that like almost constantly. But
wait, hold on one second. That was actually what he did? As a joke?
Well, I don't know if it was a joke. It was...
I never heard that story conveyed that way. Like he was like, "Hey, here's my pubic hair and a Coke can."
That's just a joke.
This is some good like Don Rickles material.
He said to Anita Hill, like, is that a pubic hair on my Coke can or something to that effect?
People
I never
pass
knew
all
the details.
sorts of messed up stuff as
people have different.
jokes.
The different people start with a different opening line.
I apologize for
And then
kink
when someone
shaming,
gets
but
mad,
I don't approve
like,
of that.
Ooh, can't you take a joke?
Yeah, no soda shaming here.
Soda shaming. I remain committed to kink shaming.
All right, let's just do one clip here. This is from Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She was at the press briefing yesterday. This is following the announcement of the inclusion of this question about citizenship, which it's the first time it will be included on the short form census, the one that you are compelled. That's the thing. You are compelled, period, as someone in the country to fill out the census, the short form, not the long form survey, which has asked about citizenship for on a regular basis, but the short form, which has not asked about citizenship since 1950. And let's put that into context. That's before the Civil Rights Act. That is following World War II. We had a little bit of issues there with rounding up some people in this country. I don't know if you recall that. It was before the emancipation of a lot of people and before we had the data to understand, really, the implications of asking that question. Remember, the Constitution of the United States requires the counting not of every citizen in the country, but of every person in the country. And so if you're asking a question that you know will inhibit an accurate count, it is unconstitutional. Here is Sarah Huckabee Sanders at the press briefing. Now, I want you all to sit down because I don't want you to freak out, but she may be telling a lie here.
This is a question that's been included in every census since 1965, with the exception of 2010 when it was removed. We've contained this question that's provided data that's necessary for the Department of Justice to protect voters and specifically to help us better comply with the Voting Rights Act, which is something that is important and a part of this process. And again, this is something that has been part of the census for decades and something that the Department Department of Commerce felt strongly needed to be included again.
Has there been any talk of trying to do some type of campaign or some other type of outreach to ensure that immigrants participate? So states like California, for instance, that have large immigrant populations are counted appropriately?
I'm not aware of those specifics, but I would refer
Right.
you to the Department of Commerce.
Yeah. So in other words, I'm going to tell a lie, and then I'm going to put some frosting on that lie by pretending it's about the Voting Rights Act. And then I'm going to say I'm not aware of anything that would mitigate the damage that we intend to do by this, because why would we do it if we were going to mitigate the damage? So I would suggest that you ask somebody else that question.
And also, shame on her for stealing my vibe with that Peter Pan collar.
I was going to say, you guys are dressed exactly like Sarah Huckabee Sanders today.
Don't drag Peter Pan collars into this.
No. All right, folks, going to head into the fun half, wherein we're going to have fun.
Oh, yes.
Oh, it's going to be crazy.
Out of context.
Now, listen, here's the thing, and I'm not going to tell a lie. I did not wade too deeply into the Ezra Klein, Sam Harris kerfuffle.
But you took him out of context.
But
out of context.
But the idea of them having a fight, I have to say, I just find, I don't know why it makes me so giddy. But Michael will update me on the twists and turns in this argument that they're having. And we'll also do a deep dive into this horrible situation with Steven Crowder, where apparently he's been deplatformed by himself. He had an accidental deplatforming. Sometimes when you clean your platform, it goes off.
It's corruption of the highest order.
Corruption of the highest order. Also, we will play some other clips, some clips of protests that are taking place in outside of City Hall and in City Hall in Sacramento over the killing of Stephon Clark. Yesterday, it was announced, not wholly unrelated, that the two cops who shot Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge will be getting no charges. Again, when the Trump administration came in, one of the first things that Jeff Sessions did was basically say to cops around the country, and I don't know if basically said to cops around the country, hey, all this stuff where the Department of Justice comes in and questions whether or not you guys are killing too many unarmed black people, that's over. We're done with that. You guys go back to regular order, do whatever you got to do whatever you got to do. And so there's not going to be, like we saw during the Obama administration, the Justice Department step in and go, what the hell? That's not happening. So we will cover that as well. We got to take a quick break. 646-257-3920 is the number. 646-257-3920 is the number. Folks, a reminder, this show relies on your support to continue. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. If you want the fun half, but you do not have the finances, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. We will take care of you. We will lock no one out. We never will lock anyone out for financial reasons. I fired a couple of members in the past.
There's been other reasons.
There's been other reasons. Like sometimes if I don't like your attitude, if you're a member and you write to us and you have some type of specific type of complaint, it might trigger me. I'm not kidding. I might go full Sam Harris on you.
Yeah, we've seen it.
And
I'll publish this exchange.
And I will exactly. Even I wouldn't do that. Sometimes I'd read
it.
But I might
exchange where I have a slow motion nervous breakdown.
That's right.
I'll publish without your permission to make
I'm only
you look
going
bad.
right, exactly. I'm only going to publish those things that are extremely embarrassing to me.
Where a listener's like, hey, I have a guest recommendation. You're like, fuck you! Horrible email like that! Take me out of context!
Guest recommendation. I want you to know this entire exchange is going up online. People are going to see how you asked me about a guest suggestion. Honestly, if you find yourself in two tweets back to back, shitting on Ezra Klein and Glenn Greenwald, and you consider yourself of the left, particularly of the center left, right? I mean, because he's not like he's saying like, I have a problem with Greenwald's libertarianism from a left critique, and a problem with Ezra Klein's liberalness from a market critique. No, it's like, it's literally like having an argument with your mirror on some level.
But the joke, oof. You can really tell his crack up with the line he used for Greenwald. It was sad.
All this and more on the fun half. Also, don't forget, today is Wednesday, which means yesterday was Tuesday, which means last night was TMBS.
Holla.
The Mohammed bin Salman show.
I was just going to say, there's a new solar panel farm in Riyadh. We talked about that. And then some new really innovative proposals that the prince has been sort of essentially trying to create a new solar panel and jetpacks.
Very, very happy
really,
to hear what they're doing with electric cars in Riyadh.
I'm excited.
Check it out on iTunes or on our YouTube channel. And, of course, Jamie's got her Patreon is burning up the interwebs because of her sort of sideways look at Michael, sort of like a broadside against Michael on
broadside
on patreon.com/Jamie Peck.
I guess you'll never know unless you read it. If that is true or not.
There you go. Boom.
I'll never know.
This is sort of like Klein versus Harris, except.
Oh, yeah. I thought that was a 90s TV show reference for a second.
Yeah, I did too. That I read for Klein versus Harris.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. 646-257-3920. Yeah, that's the 222s. That famed Canadian, I would say punk band maybe. I mean, it sounded a little bit punk. It sounded a little bit like Buzz Coxey's, a little bit, sort of like Stiff Little Finger Light.
Works for me.
What year is it from?
77 to 81. I mean, that's it, right? We're right in the, you're in the barrel.
Good time for punk.
Michael got pretty upset. He's, what did he do? He went into the other studio. And he just
Maybe he's reading my blog. He's finally reading it.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we said yesterday, the right wing does not know how to deal with students who are victims of gun violence speaking out and resonating with the American public. It's very difficult, it turns out, to attack teenagers, and particularly teenagers of this era who are very savvy when it comes to social media. I mean, we are all pretenders. We adopted this late in life. These people have grown up. Now, there's a lot of downside to that, I think. But when it comes to trying to push a social meme or a movement, this is in their wheelhouse. So what do you do if you're someone like, let's say, Alex Jones, and you're trying to top? Remember, you've had people like Ben Shapiro out there who have critiqued their presentation. And people like Rick Santorum who are saying, why be so lazy and just go out and protest against gun violence? Why aren't you learning CPR? What do you do if you're Alex Jones? Well, of course, this is what you do. You compare them to Nazis.
Gib du jetzt eine Stimme ab, wenn ja, dass ich gearbeitet habe, Jahre für dich eingesetzt habe, dass ich anständig meine Zeit, du jetzt eine Stimme ab, höre mich ein, so wie ich für dich eingesetzt habe.
Yep, there you have it. And that's what millions of dollars worth of production will get you. I mean, it was well done, but it seems to me just a little bit ham-fisted. No? Just a little bit?
It seems like Alex Jones realizes other conservatives are going a bit too full bore, and he realizes, like, I need to make sure people know who's the boss around.
Right, exactly. Like, oh, you guys think that you're being completely out of control and attacking these teenagers? Here, hold my herbal drink, my beta male, my alpha male drink here.
I like it. Hold my beta male. It's good.
Hold my beta male drink.
Hold my beta male.
Completely impromptu. All right, let me just put this up here. Michael, why don't you vamp for a second?
That was the best thing that I've seen in quite some time. I felt like he was off his game for a couple of weeks with the demonetization and divorce and stuff, and now Alex is hitting it back again on all cylinders.
Well,
welcome back.
The fun thing with Alex Jones and the David Hogg thing initially was he was trying to play this game where he's like, no, David, I just want you to come on my show and we can talk this out.
Stop calling me fat. I'm glad to have an exchange of ideas with you. Oh, don't do the interview? All right. I'll pretend you to Hitler Youth.
But then you can see, like, if you watch Alex's eyes when he says stuff like that, that he's looking for David Hogg to make any kind of slip up that he can then use to just discredit him entirely.
You know, it is amazing to watch both the right wing and the sort of like alt-light desperately go after these people and make it about, like, I just want to have an exchange of ideas. Like if Dave Rubin was not complaining about his YouTube monetization, every other thing would be, I'm setting up a charity debate, like, because it's all about charity for this guy. I'm setting up a charity debate between this lunatic and anybody on the left who's willing to come, who I think is going to drive views for me. And that's basically their.
That's such an awesome thing. You know, it'd be funny if we did a voiceover of David Hogg's speech, but it was Alex Jones talking about Stelter, and he's there and he's just like, "Ew, my God, the devil!
He's the devil."
The devil, totally the devil. The way that clip opens, though, where Stelter's up there, just like, "Hi, I'm Brian Stelter," and Alex Jones is like, "Oh my God, the humanity."
Well, because Stelter's smile was like a kid smiling for a picture when he's like 5.
You know, it's like literally like a kid, like, oh, I got my first baseball autograph, and oh my God, the devil.
So apparently, S.E. Cupp, does she have her own show now? Yep. On is this on CNN or Headline News? Oh, on Headline News, and okay. And this is, I don't even know what to make of this. Finally, Melania is in a position, this is sort of like a huge bank shot, right? Like, how can I attack Hillary Clinton but make it seem like I'm being fair and even-handed in my attack? Here we go.
Unbecoming, tabloid trash. But the word that first comes to my mind is humiliating. That the President of the United States is being sued by a porn star over an alleged affair they had years ago is humiliating for the country, certainly. That the figurehead of the Republican Party, not too long ago, the party of family values, is alleged to have had another affair with a playmate just after his son was born is humiliating for the GOP. Or it should be, anyway. But worst of all, that Donald Trump
Pause it for 1 second. Let me just also take issue with this frame. The idea that it would be humiliating to the Republican Party implies that the Republican Party ever gave a crap about any of this, and they never, ever did. And by the Republican Party, I mean all of the people who voted for Donald Trump and all of the Republican electeds who continue to kowtow and genuflect to Donald Trump. So the idea that the Republican Party would be humiliated by this is a fundamental misreading of who the Republican Party ever was. But I understand. That's part of our job.
That Donald Trump has very likely cheated on his wife multiple times with porn stars and playmates and who knows who else. And that this is all playing out very publicly is particularly humiliating for Melania Trump. Well, it's hard to imagine she didn't know who she married. She's also just a woman, a wife and a mother, like the rest of us. There's a real person in there, and she must be reeling. What she does next is no small thing. It might just be tabloid fodder for gossip rags or political chum for Hill watchers, but for a generation of young girls, Melania's next move could be formative. It was for me. I was just 13 when word of Bill Clinton's affairs hit the campaign trail and imperiled his 1992 presidential run. I had just voted for Clinton in my school's mock primary, and I was paying close attention. Burned in my mind is the image of Hillary sitting next to Bill in a 60 Minutes interview, trying to put a fresh veneer on her embattled candidate husband.
I'm not sitting here as some little woman standing by my man like Tammy Wynette. I'm sitting here because I love him and I respect him and I honor what he's been through and what we've been through together. And you know, if that's not enough for people, then heck, don't vote for him.
It was, of course, just the first of many times she would endure the particular humiliation Bill would inflict. Stories of affairs, inappropriate behavior, a graphic White House tryst with an intern, even a rape allegation, and put on a strong, united front. Over those years, Hillary became, for me, what she became for many women, the literal definition of stand by your man. While feminists trotted her out as a role model for strong women, all I saw was a woman who was humiliated time and again, and for reasons either personal or political, decided to take it. Imagine if she'd left him. Gone would have been his baggage, but also some of hers. When she said things on the campaign trail like, I've always stood for women.
Can you just just understand what has happened here? Like how deeply off the roll.
Syndrome?
Yes. I mean, this is just stunning. First off, let me just say this. To anybody who's looking up to Melania from marrying Donald Trump at any stage, at any time, for any reason, has already, it's over for them. Right? There's no reason whatsoever for the revelations that Donald Trump has had an affair or with someone who works at a I don't know, at the counter at Macy's or in pornographic movies or in the boardroom, wherever. There's no one who would even hear the story of Donald Trump attempting to pay these women after the fact, or to reward them with a job on a TV show, who should have a moment's change in their perspective on Melania. I mean, I'm sorry. Unless Melania was literally unconscious when she was when she said "I do."
Well, she does have that amazing leadership in our national efforts against bullying.
Right, exactly. Exactly. I mean, the idea that now maybe S.E. Cupp has not graduated from her perspective on the world as a 13-year-old girl, but if you can't assess that there's a difference in the accomplishments of Hillary Clinton versus Melania Trump, if you can't make an assessment of them as women outside of the fact that they both got married to somebody who cheated on them, then I would suggest the problem is not with feminists or even non-feminists, but with you. That would be my suggestion.
I can assess that you're both goddamn annoying.
There you go.
How's about that?
There are many things we can criticize Hillary Clinton for. But
of course.
Standing by her cheating husband, if anything, makes me feel sympathetic towards her.
Well, but the point is that to assess the women, to try and for her to make an argument that she is making some type of like feminist critique of Hillary Clinton, all founded on an assessment of her relationship with her husband, is just absurd. It's just absurd. There's no feminist critique associated with just looking at comparing Melania Trump and Hillary Clinton simply because of their relationships with their husband. I mean, Hillary Clinton was far more accomplished, regardless of putting aside any type of political critique, but far more accomplished as an individual in society than Melania Trump was when they got married, during their marriage, and within the White House. Indisputable. Indisputable. And that is secondary to S.E. Cupp's faux feminist critique of both these women is really telling.
Oh, please, Samantha. Even you, you big schnoz MSNBC, you have to choose one. Who are you doing?
What's that?
You have to choose one. Who are you doing? God forbid you should sleep with a female.
Wait, one? Who you doing?
Melania, she's so less accomplished than Hillary. Who are you doing? Hillary or Melania?
I think he's saying, would you rather?
Would you rather? Thank you for the translation to this woman.
Well, I don't necessarily.
You're having a lesbian tryst, Melania and Hillary.
Well, I don't know that I would make those assessments as lesbian.
Melania's the answer. You're a liar, and this is why people don't trust fake news. They don't trust the YouTube algorithm, which has juked the stats because you have suppressed the truth on Pizzagate, which is a real scandal. And even you, as a perverted, imploded manhood beta cock Jewizoid, would pick Melania because there is no other choice. My God, Hillary. That makes me feel sympathetic for Bill Clinton, and he's literally killed more people than Pablo Escobar. Look it up. It's a fact. Cultural Marxist. Clean your room.
Calling from a 773 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 773. 773. Let's see if that's them or me. Let's see this. Calling from an 818 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. This is Steve in Washington. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Steve. What's on your mind?
Great. I had an idea. I was wondering if you guys could do an interview with either Ronald Reagan or someone similar to let listeners understand what their rights are in relation to either stuff like the census or ICE. Because I'm hearing a lot of stories about ICE tricking people into like letting them into their homes or lying to them and then getting access to people's homes and arresting them and grabbing them that way. It'd be really interesting to just know, like if I'm on a bus and ICE comes on the bus, what are my rights? If I were to say
you do not have to show them anything. That's my understanding. I mean, I'll ask Ronald Reagan about this, but my understanding is you are under no obligation to show them anything.
I can see them doing tricks like you have to answer the census, open the door, you have to answer this paper, because I've heard so many deceptive things about what they're doing.
I wouldn't doubt that they can trick you, like that they if they can convince you to open the door, and you open the door, then you open the door, but and invite them in. I'm not sure 100% of that. My understanding is though, you're on a bus, the ICE can't do crap to you.
So what happened in that situation when they came on the bus and they were trying to get people to show them their papers? And
I think people get intimidated.
Weren't they pulling people off the bus?
I don't know.
Oh.
I think if you do not, if they suspect, hopefully we'll hear from Ronald Reagan and he'll answer this question. That's a good question.
Or even situations where like they come into your house without your permission, and I'm hearing people getting arrested outside their homes. And what are your rights legally, and what do you need to do that if you can take them to court, you have something to defend yourself with?
Right. All right. Good
that's
question.
The kind of things I'm just curious about.
All right. Next time he calls in, we'll do that.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate it.
Calling from a 925 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Sam, Michael, Jamie, Matt. This is Armand calling from D.C.
Armand, did you say?
Yeah, Armand.
Armand, welcome to the program. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to make a quick point. The reason why I think Sam Harris is freaking out is because I think that there's actually some degree of crossover between like the average Fox reader and the alt-light shitheads.
I think you're absolutely right.
And I think that Jordan Peterson has sucked a lot of the air out of the room on his alt-light crowd. And so that's why he went so hard on the, or not why, but it's also a combination of him going super hard on the anti-Trump stuff to keep his Vox crowd in him for the like AI kind of stuff he talks about. And now that Fox has hit him, he's lost his two main really audiences, and he feels kind of pinched in the middle. So now that's why he's like going nuts. And if you get around to reading his email exchange, you're going to piss yourself laughing because I don't like using this word, but he completely cucked himself. He cucked himself. Ezra Klein didn't even do anything. He just sat there and destroyed himself in the email exchange. It was incredibly stupid.
Ezra Klein was sitting there being like,
yesterday,
my wife's having...
And I called in about the whole electoralism stuff. I wanted to just expand on what I was saying yesterday. I think it also goes beyond just the idea of winning elections, but the ability to be able to appeal to people on a more individual level as well in your organizing. So obviously we're all fighting for our class interests, and the class interests matter, stuff like Medicare, et cetera. And that stuff does translate over obviously to individual gains. But even I think the organizing itself needs to go further into appealing to people's individual interests, such as being able to get people appointments, jobs, but also being able to go and do poor communities and hold potlucks and barbecues and throw parties and kind of be able to create social life for people and feed needs, right? So have food programs for kids in the morning, or be able to bring in voluntary nurses and dentists and doctors to be able to give people checkups every few months. There's got to be some kind of immediate material need. Because oftentimes, if you for example, I grew up super poor in a super poor neighborhood, the kind of neighborhoods you might see in a blaxploitation movie or something like that. A lot of the people that I knew don't know anything about anarchy or communism or any of this stuff, because a lot of people I grew up frankly don't know how to read, right? Or would really struggle reading or doing any of this kind of stuff. So the idea that you're going to have a poor people's movement or try to appeal to these people, and you have nothing to offer them today, right? But you think that's going to be able to carry it. This is unrealistic, right? This is why it's so hard to get people to the polls and get people to vote, is because there's nothing there for them immediately,
a while
back in their life.
A while back, we had talked about a DSA program. I can't remember where it was, but they were fixing taillights of people.
Yeah, like that's a really interesting.
Stuff like
idea.
that is I think along the lines of what you're talking about, and providing some
But
material.
like, I think that should be the focus.
You know, we're working on it as a DSA member. I must tell you, I'm on the events committee for North Brooklyn, and we're always trying to come up with ways that we can impact people's lives in a material way.
We saw that a lot during Occupation Sandy too.
Occupy Sandy.
Occupy Sandy, where folks who were involved in the Occupy movement were basically not functioning as first responders, but first rebuilders, I guess. I mean, they were building houses. They were helping people deal. Sandy was devastating. I'm talking about the sort of near hurricane that we had, particularly in
Coney Island,
areas
South Brooklyn
that are certainly have less services and less money than other parts of New York. But I think it's a good point. I appreciate the call.
We actually have a healthcare event coming up pretty soon where we're going to have people showing people how to sign up for Medicaid. We're still nailing down the date, but TBD. Well, it's TBD and
Both.
TBA.
It's both.
TBD.
Synthesis. In a certain sense.
We still have another clip from that Allison Camerata panel with students yesterday, and it's sort of fascinating. I don't know. Like, I feel like we've seen panels with liberals and conservatives on a panel, right? Not necessarily about guns, but about different things that Camerata has had people together. And the disparity, I don't know why it is, but the disparity between the intelligence level, and this is students, right? These are just young people. You don't see this level of disparity in older people. Maybe it's just the way that they go, but it's literally like you've got 2 or 3 people on this panel who are incredibly thoughtful, well-spoken, and articulate, and then like one kid who looks like he's in 5th grade. He doesn't look like he looks like he's a big kid, but he speaks like he's in 5th grade. And I don't know. I think maybe it's just at this age, it's even more pronounced than it is when you start getting into your 30s and 40s and 50s. I mean, maybe I'm projecting here, but watch this. They're talking about gun control and race, and you have some very sort of like thoughtful analysis from these folks on the gun control side, and then just sort of, rote talking points that, here we go.
Arizona and Pennsylvania to discuss gun violence, but the conversation quickly veered into a heated debate on the connection of guns and race.
Race affects the way that people live, they eat, where they go to school, and all of this is there are factors in violence and inner city violence. With those students who were at the march, we're talking about from Baltimore, from Chicago, until we want to talk about the root causes, the conversation will never be complete, and we won't get to the bottom of it.
Chicago and Baltimore, to my recollection, have some of the strictest gun laws in the country.
But don't you think the guns come in from the Indiana, from the surrounding states?
They have relaxed gun laws. That's how they're able to get them.
And now the left also wants open borders, and this will allow illegal guns to flood into the country.
Wait a minute, but do you
pause it for 1 second? Let me just
so prematurely aged, man.
Let me just say something about open borders. To the extent that the left wants open borders, I don't think the idea is that you can bring anything over. I think the idea is that we would allow for free flows of immigration, not like, hey, you want to bring a tank across the border? Help us out. It's a completely open border. We don't even know where it is.
If somebody's from Guatemala or Mexico, they can bring. I mean, look, we're regressive, anti-exchange of idea guys here. So I would say if you want to bring a machine gun from Mexico and about like a key of heroin and a tank, I would welcome you across the border and then apologize.
That's
for,
right. And give you some voter registration.
Yeah, I would give you here are some voter registration forms and a safe space campus tour across the country. Anything else you need to help set up your heroin distribution network?
Not to be a pedantic fact checker here, but if anything, guns are flowing the other direction from the U.S. to other countries.
Exactly. But I will also add, just to be fair, we have many times on this program talked about the plan to have that that rug where you just step on it and you vote for a Democrat. Right. It's just
you mean the Islamic prayer rug?
Yeah, it's sort of like those Islamic prayer rugs, but it's you know how they sometimes you step on the rug and the supermarket door opens.
Right.
That in this instance we just hooked it up to a voting machine.
The only difference is you're kneeling, so you can pray to Mecca.
And now, and the left also wants open borders, and this will allow illegal guns to flood into the country.
Wait a minute, but do you think that guns come in from Indiana, as police say they do in Illinois?
I don't know where they're coming from.
I think it's a problem that you say you don't know where they're coming from. We should know where these guns are coming from.
Do you know exactly where they're coming from? Why don't you want to have good guys with guns to protect you from criminals that are getting their weapons illegally?
Who is carrying out these mass shootings? Okay, young white men and...
Now you're a racist. Why are you attacking white people?
That's the statistic. It's just the fact.
What about Omar Mateen, though?
Okay.
It's race.
There are exceptions to the rule.
What about that
but
guy?
School shooters generally are young white men.
Yes.
Okay. And they're also pumped up on meds, too.
We cannot solely just say that it's mental illness. We're arming hate in our country. If we had more armed guards in our school, again, it would perpetuate the school-to-prison pipeline. We have to be cognizant.
And how would it do that? Just help me understand the logic.
Because,
if you're treated like a criminal, you're going to act like a criminal.
Exactly. And this mindset, the way that we are socialized in schools as being seen as criminals, as being black bodies, then that is going to contribute to your way of life.
I'm not white, I'm not black, but I am a person of color. And I don't feel comfortable. I'm walking around and I'm looking at these cops and I'm like, do they think I'm up to something because of the color of my skin? And that's how all of my friends that are black in my school feel.
Wow. I mean, maybe
You're
it's possible.
racist.
Maybe it's possible that when CNN goes out to look for this stuff, they're like, we're going to go to the AP classes to find those providing the left perspective. And then we're going to go to...
I bet that kid gets good grades, actually.
Yeah.
You
probably
think so?
knows. Yeah, I bet he knows how to
possible.
take a test. Yeah.
What else is he doing on the weekends?
Although I have to say, if you found at least, I can't say from high school, obviously, but in college, if you went to the equivalent, the conservative kids who probably were in AP classes, they're a lot more transparently sociopathic than that kid. That kid's bringing up the lunkhead sort of conservative, not the well, I actually just think that
we should just kill them all.
We should just. What if you were all killed? Wouldn't you
My
feel more
board
safe
doesn't
that way?
work. I got to get a new board.
I can imagine Trump watching that and be like, yeah, call the black girl a racist.
Yeah, exactly.
Good one.
Good one.
Good one.
God, blacks are
Score
so,
one for that dude.
That's why we wouldn't let them in our buildings, because they're so racist. Can't live with them because they just are so hateful.
All right. I don't have my breaking news thing, but we've got to do some hard news here. Ladies and gentlemen, it came to our media free speech correspondent, Matt Leck's, attention sometime around last evening that Steven Crowder was deplatformed by the University of Illinois. Let me read from Steven Crowder's 8:35 a.m. tweet yesterday morning. So I guess Matt was sort of resting a little bit for most of the day, and then started.
I was doing
the
shows all day.
I was doing shows. So the corresponding came a little later. So 8:35 a.m. University of Illinois show for Thursday was just canceled. Corruption of the highest order. Tonight, I abandon the show map, cancel my guests, and let it rip. What I believe Mr. Crowder is referring to is the Louder with Crowder episode of Wednesday evening, or I should say of Tuesday evening, right? Where he was going to throw away the show map. One of the things that a good presenter of louder information does is they map out the show. And when you throw that out, that means forget about it. Watch out. He canceled his guest. He's going to let it rip. They just kicked a big ol' O-L apostrophe. This is a way in which of like being a little more folksy. Ol' angry hornet's nest filled to the brim with, quote, I don't give a fucks, end quote. Hashtag war. Hashtag LWC for Louder with Crowder. The hashtag war means that he's going to war over this. And then more came out about the corruption of the highest order. This is from the Illini Republicans. It's with great regret we're informing you that Steven Crowder has canceled his show at the University of Illinois this coming Thursday. What corruption have we found here? We apologize for the abysmally short notice. We just found out ourselves. We apologize to the 600 plus fans with confirmed tickets. Now that does sound corrupt. In the interest of being fully transparent with those who had been looking forward to this event for months, that also sounds very suspicious. We feel it's important to document the series of events that led to it being canceled. It was understood when it was originally planned that there were certain demands for the venue unique to Crowder's show. Then, roughly 72 hours before the event was scheduled to begin, we received a call from Crowder's team informing us that in addition to the previously listed requirements, they would need access to the auditorium for the entire day beforehand to set up. Note that, unfortunately, this is not something that we would be able to provide under any circumstance. Lincoln Hall is an academic building. This theater holds regularly scheduled classes until 5 p.m. on most days of the week. In addition to the setup demands, we were also contacted by a university facilities manager that same day informing us that in order to accommodate the production demands placed by Crowder's team, we would have to pay nearly $1,000 more than initially expected. Including those fees were, among other things, a fog machine and over $500 in union electrician fees.
Shout out to unions.
There you go. Good for them.
Unions always win with Crowder. There was a great union moment with Crowder several years ago.
We suggested several alternate arrangements to Crowder's team. These included moving the event to a Saturday or starting the event at a later time. Regretfully, they rejected each of these proposals.
He really needs a fog machine to sell those jokes.
Wow. Now, so, okay. Crowder then tweeted out this. Where was it? Where did he say he was going to? Oh, here it is. Okay. So, Crowder promised to explain the situation in detail in his podcast Tuesday night, saying, I will make this hurt. But then later he posted that the podcast had been postponed until today due to scheduling conflicts.
That's what you do after you have a big threat, after a major sort of public falling out. You say, I'm going to settle the score on a specific date. And then you're like, oh, there's a scheduling conflict.
If I remember correctly, on Tuesday he said, we're going to throw out the show map. We're going to cancel the guests and we're going to let it rip. And he was going to do this because his old beehive got shook loose and all the fucks came out, flying out of it, right? Is that what happened?
All the I don't give a fucks.
All the I don't give a fucks came flying out.
It was a big old angry hornet's nest.
It was a big old angry hornet's nest. And now, I got to say, there's nothing worse than when you're messing with a big old angry hornet's nest and all the fucks fly out of it. That's gross.
But if you are going to kick a big old angry hornet's nest, make sure it has scheduling conflicts right afterwards.
That's right. So now
the hornet's nest that I just kicked had other obligations.
It appears now Steven Crowder is going to move the show to tomorrow and going to have guests. Stéphane Molyneux, the sort of like fading cult figure, right?
Reinvented
and
furiously as
T.R.
a sort of
Robinson New Era.
Kind of
I don't know who that is.
I don't know who that is.
But this is going to be fascinating stuff.
I'm sure Crowder will want to set the record straight with what the college Republicans are saying at the Illini Republicans are saying.
I wonder if he'll address that. Huh. Interesting.
Am I the only one who's incredibly distracted by how much he resembles Billy Eichner's unfunny straight twin?
Yeah, exactly.
Look at that picture of that guy.
And I will also say, like, what is it? What happens when you go out and you claim that you that they canceled? I mean, did he think he was going to get away with that?
Yeah. His audience are morons.
I mean, a lot of them.
I wonder if he's going to concede this, or is he just going to like throw to Stefan Molyneux?
Yeah, so far he's ignored it.
He's going to throw to Stefan Molyneux, but his audience is made up of people who like Dennis Miller is too clever for, and Ben Shapiro is too intellectually intimidating. So yeah, I think he thought he could get away with it.
I like Crowder because he actually looks at the camera sometimes.
That he does.
You've got 10 seconds to convince me male privilege is a myth. Change my mind.
Andrew Wynn Olympia. Jamie, I don't know a Peter Pan collar from anything else, but your collar today looks more like Wednesday Addams than Peter Pan. I don't know what that means.
I will post a blog about it.
Joseph Ballin. Sounds like MR is getting their talking points about the Soviet Union and China from the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation or some other right-wing think tank.
Shit.
I hope MR realizes that the term tanky is a term used by white supremacists to attack socialist people of color, namely the PSL, for fighting for national liberation struggles. Not only do I, and was I not aware of that, I barely know what the word tanky means. I don't know what the PSL is.
I think you're learning right now.
I do really appreciate
I don't want to know.
your fierce commitment to not learn this lingo. I think it's actually it's one of your better signs of mental health.
Not going to.
It's good. It's good. I wish I could unlearn some of it. I don't know what PSL is.
Golden Toad just started listening to John Bolton's 2007 autobiography. One reason to hate him is the fact that his first case as a lawyer was Buckley v. Vallejo. The Iranian that he names the most is Hassan Rouhani, and he spends a whole chapter outlining how to get out of a treaty and specifically mentions Russia's ties to Iran. All this is to say, the age of Trump, we may have ruined my brain, but when I heard that Russian diplomats were kicked out of the country this week, I thought, what if this has less to do with the assassination attempt in the UK and more to do with Russia's probable opposition to military action against Iran, making it more likely that we go along that path? What do you think? I don't know.
It's very scary.
It's
legitimately something to be disturbed by, which I know is generic, but it's true.
Calling from a 330 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, it's Ryan from Ohio.
Hello, Ryan. What's on your mind?
So you guys were talking about the census, and I wanted to talk about in Ohio here. We have a Secretary of State election coming up with the governor's election, and the guy on the Republican side, Frank LaRose, he sponsored a bill in our state House and Senate that reduced the number of absentee voting days. So, like, this is a really important election because, like, this guy, his two big issues are voter suppression and abortion suppression. So,
wow,
it's
happy days in Ohio.
Yeah, and also I want to say the MR family is like looking good. You got all these spin-off podcasts going that are all like really cool. Antifada, TMBS, Doomed. So like you should be proud. You're like a daddy.
That's that's very nice of you. Yes, all the spores,
Yeah.
all the spores spread out into the world.
Go create content.
Go. I appreciate the call. Get into a bunch of online wars.
Have disputes with people online.
Get as petty as you can. Calling from a 773 area code. Who's this? Not that. Oh. I just hung up by mistake. 773. 773. Who's this? 773. There were two numbers there, and I thought the... All right. Calling from a 215 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Sean from Harrisburg. How's everyone doing?
Good. How you doing, Sean? What's on your mind?
So I want to give a quick update on a huge embarrassment for the DCCC in this area. Christine Hartman.
Yeah, no, wait a second. Let me just back up. Let me back up. Christine Hartman was the woman that Ryan Grimm wrote about in his piece in The Intercept on how the DCCC came in and supported Christine Hartman over, I think her name was, I want to say King?
Jess King.
Jess King.
Yeah.
In a race, and I think that would have been in Lancaster, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And DCCC came in.
So with the redistricting.
Yep. Go ahead.
We have a redistricting. Jess King's district and Hartman's district became a lot more conservative and a lot more favorable for Lloyd Smucker to get reelected. It went from like an like a lower number to like an R20. So it's heavily favorable for Smucker to get reelected. So Hartman came in about a month ago and set up shop in the Harrisburg district, which is Scott Perry's the incumbent. And that district went from like an R15 to like an R6.
Yep.
So it's a lot more favorable for Democrats to win it now. She got knocked off the ballot yesterday because of, like, she only handed in like 89 of 1,000 ballot signatures for her petition.
The DCCC candidate could not even get 1,000 signatures. That's how bad it was for them. Yeah, no, it's an embarrassment. Yeah. I mean, look, here's the thing. Right, and if you took the story that Ryan Grimm did in The Intercept, and you look at the story also that, and I interviewed this woman, Lena Putnam, who did a report with Theta Scopel, certainly ideologically framed, different than the Intercept piece. But the one thing that resonates, whether you're talking about Pennsylvania or Georgia or other states, is that when the DCCC comes in, they don't know what they're doing. Like, put aside ideology, they are incompetent. They are incompetent to go and favor a candidate over another candidate who does not have the ability to get 1,000 signatures shows a core incompetency that is like, I don't think that you could get that incompetent through the law of average. Like, you would have to bring in experts on how can we build an apparatus that is this incompetent, because otherwise we won't get there by chance.
Maybe that's a sign that there's something else going on.
What's that?
I know a couple more quick points about this. She raised $360,000, and that's all gone because she's not on the ballot anymore. And then I live in the neighborhood where she supposedly moved to in Harrisburg. And the address was this like old school building that was converted into lofts for like $500 a month, and you lease them out on a month-to-month basis. A bunch of like, you know, local minor league sports players play there, or people pass them through the city, and just don't want to sign a long-term lease. So she moved to this like really shitty like apartment building right next to the, like right across from the Capitol complex. But she would have been better off just trying to stay in Lancaster and running from outside the district. But yeah, and then one last quick point. I'm part of one of the DSA chapters that actually had the brake light, did like the brake light
okay.
events in central Pennsylvania.
What else do you guys have planned?
Nothing. I work on the weekends when they meet up, so I don't know exactly what's going on. But no, I'm just a member, pay my dues, and try to get up to the meetings when I can.
All right. Well, thanks for the call. I appreciate it.
Yep. Have a good one.
You too. Bye. Wooden Computers. Hey, guys, asking for a friend. There's a service that sends edible chocolate penis in a box that say eat dick when you... Okay.
It sounded promising.
Yep. Jonathan Armstead. Sam, thank you so much for yesterday's clip showing Herman Cain defending Donald Trump's racism. As an Afro-American growing up, I was always taught that being a black Republican was like bringing a noose to your own lynching. But Herman Cain takes it up a notch by bringing the hangman a special nylon hemp rope so their hands won't chafe. On a related note, would you ever bring in someone from Right Wing Watch, maybe for a Friday wrap-up show? I follow them online and donate when funds aren't tight. They do great work and appreciate good jokes. We've had, gosh darn it, I don't know why I can't remember his name. David, he used to, Ornicus, Nywert. We've had him on a couple of times over the years. I think he does. All right, let's talk about this Stefan Clark protest. I mean, this is coming also, I think, and very much, I think, probably a coincidentally, the story I think took place while I was out with pneumonia, but Stefan Clark was shot, I think, in his grandmother's backyard, holding a cell phone. And I will say, at least in this instance, they are beginning to investigate whether or not charges should be brought. Right? It's California. I don't know what the situation is in Sacramento per se, but compare this to what's going on with Alton Sterling, who just yesterday, I guess, on the 27th, it was announced by the Attorney General, Jeff Landry, that the two Baton Rouge police officers, Blaine Salamone and Howie Lake II, would not be indicted. I mean, this is the guy was shot, he was selling CDs, I guess, in front of a convenience store, which is always a real threat to the public. But here are protests outside of City Hall yesterday in Sacramento.
Step on Clark! 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 Step on Clark!
And then inside City Hall, I guess, I don't know if there's a courtroom or this was a hearing, and Stefan Clark's brother basically took over this courtroom or this hearing hall inside City Hall, and they don't seem to be able to do anything about it there.
Stefan Clark! 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 Louder! Louder! Stefan Clark!
And his brother's obviously getting quite upset. And again, we live in an era now where the idea of the Justice Department coming in and any type of civil rights violation, that's off the table now. So there's going to have to be a lot more direct action locally and persistent. And I don't know if even, it's hard to know what that's going to do, but this keeps happening. It's not going to stop. But it's going to be interesting to see if we see, you already see some evidence of the movement that's coming out of the Parkland shooting, and there's already been this intersection between gun violence, obviously, and Black Lives Matter, but it's going to be interesting to see if this begins to expand outward. And regain prominence that, I think a large extent the Trump victory sort of pushed it off the headlines.
We heard that teen and the panel talking about it, which
Exactly.
is very good to hear.
Yep, exactly. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 913 area code. I got about 10 minutes, folks. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, can you hear me?
I can. Who's this?
Hey, Sam, this is Mesbah. I'm calling from Oceanside, California. Hope you guys are doing well.
Yes, what's on your mind?
here's what happened, man. And this is kind of concerning because I was at the gym just a few minutes ago, and I was watching on headline news on CNN as well as Fox. They were talking about Trump has plans to build the wall using Pentagon funding from the increased funding from towards the Pentagon from the spending bill.
Right.
And I'm just curious where you guys stand on that. I mean, 2018. It is 2018. The election's coming up. Do you guys feel like they're going to gain some traction and make some moves in terms of building the wall, even if it's with Pentagon funding before year's end? Or, I mean, because otherwise, I mean, I don't even know how this is going to affect them electorally. Basically, that's where we're at. It seems like they're getting more and more traction as time passes on this issue.
I mean, I don't know. I guess it's of all the things that are going on, the thing that I'm not going to worry about that much is Donald Trump taking money from the Pentagon to build some dumbass wall that will have little sort of like mechanical implications. What's probably going to make me nauseous is when you start to hear Democrats talking about starving our military for the wall, because that is the sort of like the easiest leverage point that they'll use, and it's stupid. So that's going to be super annoying. But beyond that, it's I don't see that having any electoral salience. And I don't know what creates less deaths, pouring that money into the Pentagon or not.
And realistically, I just don't, I mean, honestly, and this is laziness on my part, I'll admit, I haven't actually looked at where the Republican base stands now on the issue of the wall. I mean,
I don't think they stand anywhere. I don't think they stand anywhere. I think the Republican base will just do whatever Donald Trump will support whatever Donald Trump does, because at the end of the day, the only thing they can contemplate is what makes the libtards mad. And so if they think and supporting Donald Trump makes the libtards mad, end of story. They don't care if it's see-through wall or not see-through. They don't understand the intricacies of the need of why you need a see-through wall, because if you don't have a see-through wall, you won't be able to see through it. And I mean, they don't care. They don't care. They don't care about any of it. Appreciate the call.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. All right. Final call of the day. You calling from a 412 area code. Who's this? 412. 412. 412.
Ooh.
I know, it was weird.
Ad hominem.
All the calls just...
Ad hominem.
All right. Well, good. We'll end the calls right there. We'll take a couple IMs. We'll do some real IMing today. Contagious chameleon. If Democrats take back both houses in the presidency, can they fix the pre-clearance issue? Yes, they can. What the Supreme Court said is that you got to come up with a new formula for the pre-clearance and vote on it. I guess theoretically they could even come up with the same formula and vote on it. I'm not sure about that, but I think pretty close. A square. About why the right is so scared. The understanding by the Parkland teens of their privilege, the ways in which they leverage it and use it to arrange the program, the defiance of the speeches, and the level of solidarity displayed Saturday was inspiring but very frightening to the right. Time will tell if they can be sustained, but I'm hoping. So the voter suppression will only intensify. Thanks, Ari, for the work you do every day. Solidarity. Dirk Campbell, the father of Anna Campbell, who was killed by Turkey in Afrin, is calling on the UK government to negotiate a ceasefire in Afrin in order to be able to retrieve bodies. Young Labour has made a statement of solidarity that condemns Tory and Labour leaders who have taken the side of Turkish war crimes. More info at #ceasefire for Afrin.
And check out Jean Bajalan and I for The Region on Erdogan's, why Erdogan's attack in Afrin is a punishment for the Kurds' electoral success in Turkey.
Do we link that?
Yeah, I think we linked it.
Left Frank, why don't we link it again, just because we mentioned it. Left Flank Fran. I'm considering sidewalk crashing a cryptocurrency conference at the University of Pennsylvania next Friday for some gonzo audio asking Wharton Brothers what they think of upcoming shitcoin ICO. Shitcoin, if you remember, is the next gen perfect inflation equilibrium crypto that can only be mined from dog shit with its ideal perpetual production and decay. Anything else you want to hear me ask? That's pretty good, but I actually think, to be honest with you, if I was going to develop a shitcoin, I would mine it by actually taking shits. Like human. Every time a human goes to the bathroom, you simply hook up the sewer to generating enough energy to function an algorithm that will add to
invest in laxatives.
Yep.
It's more democratic that way. Not everyone has a dog.
Yeah, I think the dog thing that's messed up. Brave-O-Matic, if I understand the libertarian theory correctly, YouTube demonetized right-wing media. The market will now punish YouTube, which will lose its viewers' users, and thus YouTube will go out of business. Is that it? Left is best. Farmer Gillian, tell me about it when it comes to triggering Sam Seder. There you go. Dragon Slayer. So now that we have in cases of both gerrymandering and census, we have math as one of their greatest defenders. Will you call off your war on math? Never. Also, can't wait to hear Roberts reiterate that judges shouldn't know math. Scott M. Great interview with Ari. Placing the census move within the broader effort to cheat democracy is important. We can't make the laws against everything. They will take anything that's not bolted to the floor. And I'm sure even if they technically lose the census fight, Trump can say bullshit and it'll make fewer people want to participate. Quick thing. I was surprised Trump's tweet with excoriate made you think Hannity wrote it. I immediately thought Gorka. Maybe I'm just hearing Michael's impression. I am telling you, it is Sean Hannity's favorite word, and it's been that way for almost 2 years. Maybe more. Gabe from Chicago. Hey, man, on Monday, you folks read a message that used the term dead name, and I was surprised that none of you knew what that was. A dead name is the name a trans person no longer uses if they adopt a new one after coming out as trans.
No, I think we do.
I know what that is.
Yeah, I think it was another part of that message that was
I did not know what that meant. Used as a verb, to dead name someone is to use their dead name to attack them. Conservatives do this all the time. I see.
I'm familiar with that.
I see.
I'm sure Jamie is.
Rob Cully. Last week you talked about taking over the Best Show, talking about the Iraq invasion. Do you have a recording of the archives? If so, could we have it in entirety as a member special, perhaps? Maybe. I think I've done that before, and I need to listen to it because it's so bad. I think it was just so bad.
Hi, this is Sam. I'm so angry about Iraq, and I just did an audition for a show about Jews who get upset in their dating lives, but I'm so mad about George Bush, God damn it.
If you
Is
want
that a cue for the phones? What?
If you want to see something funny, I honestly, the first 3 minutes was done on the wrong mic. So here, keep Michael's mic up.
You know what we should do?
And put mine down.
Is that... Yes.
It sounds like I'm off mic.
Oh, that's so great.
And of course, okay.
You know what? Maybe we should do.
It wasn't my fault. I wasn't working the tech.
Maybe we should. No, this might be too complicated, but it'd be funny to do sort of a part, play part of it and do a rundown of it where we critique your style.
Oh my god. My god.
Also, does your accent come out more in it because you're pissed and a little fresh?
I don't know. I don't know about that. Possibly. I was drinking. Habers Malo. Harris Klein Greenwald. Los Tres Gringos Pedantiscos. Good God. It would be quite a threesome. Right-wing Mandela has a better political strategy, more comprehensible politics than Brooks. Sorry, not sorry. To be honest, leftist concern trolls constantly repeat unsubstantiated right-wing stories. For example, Brett Weinstein's totally inaccurate claim that whites were forced off campus at Evergreen. That's not true, by the way. So guys like Crowder just throw out disinformation out there and see what sticks. I consistently see campus reform nonsense repeated by leftists who don't care about the public space at State University for whatever reason. It's not easy doing media, but simply correcting errors or inaccuracy helps. So I guess I'd be very careful about stories that make the VA, Social Security, or public schools look bad. Chris Burdick, if only Jackie Kennedy had learned CPR, America would have been spared one of the most tragic moments. Jake from Indiana, if the Majority Report got side cameras, then Sam would have to brush his hair. DX Fool. Ben Shapiro once bragged that he was the youngest syndicated columnist at age 17, which, of course, is more than what Joan of Arc or Malala Yousafzai did at that age. He also said at Yeshiva University Forum that Jews should not donate to non-Jewish charities and that transgender people like Caitlyn Jenner had a mental disorder. Shapiro once filed assault charges against Katie Turr's parent Zoe Turr for touching his shoulder when they were on Dr. Drew Pinsky's old HNLN show. I remember that.
That's in the Anarchy's Michael Brooks show track. And then Obama goes, World Star, baby, World Star.
Mitch from Houston. I heard a sound clip of Rubin saying he would absolutely vote Trump at 2020 if Democrats run a crazy progressive like Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. Rubin's fan also seemed to think his latest guest, John Kasich, is essentially a big government Democrat. Blackjack Leo, could you please explain more about long-form versus short-form questionnaire difference? I found a link with the questionnaires. One is the actual census. One is a supplement to the census that goes out to a smaller number of people and is used to sort of extrapolate. All right, 3 more IMs. Placeholder. The Alex Jones video is not professional. The speech from Hitler is maybe 1.5 sentence repeated 3 times. It makes no sense. Also, the Nazis gave minors guns to prepare them for the war they were planning. The result of all of this were child soldiers were deeply traumatized after the war. Jay Cool, Sam, have you ever considered raising the rent on TMBS to pay for a more durable backdrop? What happened? Did it break? Angry Modern. Has the increase in membership of the show meant that you can retire with a peace of mind? Soon, very soon. And with Trump's election now, does it mean America is just another country among others? Is American exceptionalism over in the mind of Americans? Not enough. All right, the final IM of the day. Retcon. Sam, this is the Masonry apprentice you sent a membership invite to. Thank you. Just wanted to say the fun has made me realize how much of an asshole Michael can be. I think being an assistant...
Only in the fun half?
Being a DJ's assistant is pretty cool and hip. Don't let him tell you otherwise. All right, folks. Michael will be here tomorrow. See you Friday or tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie.